All right, well, welcome back, everybody, to the latest Collision Hub webinar. Today, we've got our friends from AirPro back with us again, AirPro Diagnostics back again. Today, we're going to talk about diagnostics again. What do I need to know and how do I get paid? So, pretty important topic, a lot of debate and controversy and issues out there. So, we want to make sure that we cover that today. So, we've got Josh, Chuck, and Eric back with us again today. So, gentlemen, welcome back. It's great to have you back again. Really appreciate your help with these webinars and getting the information out. So, before we go ahead and start kicking it off, just to remind everybody, we're on the webinar feature today, not the meeting feature that some of you may have participated in the past. So if you do have a question, please feel free to raise your hand with the application that you've got on there. The Q&A will be open. I'll be monitoring it as well as the chat feature. So if you do have a question, go ahead and enter that in the chat, enter that in the Q&A, or raise your hand and I can take you off of mute to go through that. So with that, gentlemen, would you please introduce yourself real briefly and then we'll get into it.
All right, I'll go ahead and go first. This is Chuck Olson, Senior Vice President of Automotive Technology with AirPro Diagnostics, and looking forward to a good, lively discussion today.
Thanks, Chuck.
Eric.
All right, I guess I'll go next. Eric Newell here, Vice President of Field Operations for AirPro Diagnostics, and looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have and tackling what we know will be some heavy-hitting subjects.
Sounds good. And then Josh McFarland here, Vice President of Strategic Business Operations at AirPro, and like Chuck and Eric both said, looking forward to the dialogue. Enjoyed the last one of these. Hopefully, I know I see some familiar names in the audience. So hopefully we'll get some more good questions again today, like we did last time.
Cool. And just a real quick prompt for we are going to be doing several more of these with AirPro Diagnostics. So keep your eyes open for that, and we'll have a little bit more information about that at the end. But we're doing a lot of these. They'll go back on the Collision Hub website as well for viewing afterwards. So if you've got any peers that aren't able to join us today, we'll have the link available in the not too distant future for you to do that. So guys, I don't know who wants to answer this first question, but let's start with just the basics. We're talking about collision repair diagnostics and this whole, pre-scan, post-scan, all these different terminologies that when we talk about the word scan, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about a scan?
Yeah, so I'll start off with that one, Jason, and we're going to start off there. And you're right, there's been a lot of debate about what's included, what's not included, and a lot of discussion input around the industry into the CIC wiki that's been hosted by Sika. So I'm going to use a definition that's had a lot of input around the industry. So a scan, and that is a process of using a scan tool to query a vehicle network buses to identify which ECUs are equipped, communicating, and have DTC stored. So that's the definition that's been put forward for the industry of a scan. There's a lot of other areas, a lot of other things that are done with a scan tool beyond that, and we've had a lot of discussion amongst ourselves of all the different nuances that happen once you get past that initial step of a scan. So Eric, I know you had some input there. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and that was a very technical definition, right?
It was.
Yeah, and that's the true definition. I like to say a scan is simply that. It's a scan of computer systems that create some form of indicator information that come back outside of normalcy, right? It's just some form of indication that something isn't right. Anyone can scan a car. I can tell you can go to AutoZone today and you have a 15, 16-year-old kid out of high school, nothing wrong with that. Hook up a scan tool to your vehicle and tell you the code, right? I know because my 12-year-old's done it in my driveway. So simplistically, a scan is just that. Josh, what do you think?
So I like to try and downplay the word scan because I think it works against us in the industry as a whole. And I mean, as Chuck's definition from the CIC Definition Committee and as Eric's indicated, a scan on its own is little more than a code pull. And the cheap tool that they use at an auto parts store, like AutoZone or Eric's son has used in the past, you know, something simple. It can check DTCs and technically perform a scan. That should really be just the very first step in the process. And to do all that is needed, you need capable, up-to-date diagnostic software as well as a skilled operator, somebody that knows how to use that software in order to get all the information that you need, and then get into interpreting that information and figuring out what to do with it. I know we'll get into a little bit more about that later, but it really comes down to, I don't like the word scan. Pre-scan and post-scan, I think it makes it feel like a commodity. It makes it feel like something really simple that doesn't require a whole lot of intelligence or skill set. And I think, you know, where we can, we should steer away from it or downplay it and make it what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Josh. I like to use the term diagnostic, right?
Yeah.
What do you had some more thoughts on this, though, didn't you, Chuck?
Yeah. So as we get beyond that, and you know, I don't want to downplay the importance of doing the DTC pull and finding out what's going on with the vehicle. So because it is an important step, but again, at that point, we're just scratching the surface. You know, doing a general scan. You know, what's on the vehicle, what areas, where's indicating my areas of trouble. That's going to require more work, and I want to talk a little bit about, you know, general scanning. So what we just described with doing a code pull is general scanning, and expecting the results of what you see versus component level scanning. So when you're doing component level scanning, that's really where an operator gets involved and you're finding out more information goes on that you're not going to get that out of clicking a button and doing a DTC pull. That's where you start drilling down into individual modules, looking at data inputs, data PIDs, the state of diagnostic trouble codes, whether it's a current code, a permanent code, a history code. And, you know, that's really where the work starts happening. And the expertise. So now at this point, we're doing it like Josh had mentioned, diagnostics, and Eric as well. At that point, you're really performing diagnostics. You're using the scan tool to give you information to make decisions in that diagnostic process. Now that you've scratched the surface of that first point, do I have diagnostic trouble codes? What's involved in that vehicle? And those kind of things. And I've seen and heard a lot of feedback as well in the industry with the general scans. I'm going to say you can't really trust a general scan all by itself. I've seen scan reports that come back that are only reporting half the modules, and that's taken, okay, it's not going any further. Is this vehicle equipped with more things? Are there electronic damage to where that diagnostics needs to take place? Even further beyond that that basic scan. So what you know, airbag deployments, things that don't list DTCs, and an operator that's starting to know where to look. And then of course you got service information and additional inspections after that.
You know, I often hear the analogy when it comes to scanning, the kind of tying it back to medical, taking an X-ray or, performing an MRI. And I guess, kind of where you guys are going, I think that's a decent analogy. But once I take that X-ray, I need to analyze that X-ray. And once I go through that MRI process, I need to analyze that MRI and interpret that and try to figure out what exactly the issue is. Is that an accurate analogy for the industry to be using to help explain what we're doing?
I think that's a great analogy. I think that's phenomenal. It's when you compare it to medical, there's signs and symptoms and there's a diagnosis, right? You go to the doctor with a cough or a fever, or those are signs and symptoms, and that's a quick indicator that something's wrong. But they have to go in and do further tests, blood work, X-rays, just like you said, to come up with an actual diagnosis. So comparing it to the medical field, I think is incredibly accurate.
Okay, cool. So,
Yep.
Yes. Now, so kind of moving on now. So we kind of talked about what is that initial kind of scan. So when we're talking about actually, charging for, or getting paid for the scan, what exactly are we paying for? What is, what's the bill payer paying for? And what aren't we paying for that maybe we need to start looking at and start thinking about? Because my personal belief is kind of, the old analogy or metaphor about, kind of stepping over, dollars to pick up pennies or whatever. I think that we've kind of gone that place with scanning and this whole, I'm not getting paid to pre-scan or post-scan. What exactly are we paying for? Are we missing some operations that we should be getting reimbursed for?
So I think we've got a couple of ways we're going to tackle both parts of that question. So as far as what is being paid for, ultimately, I think it boils down to it's the labor of a skilled diagnostician to properly assess the damage, diagnose what is found, and then verify that everything is working correctly after the repair. I mean, that's kind of the bare bones essentials of what's being paid for. Now, there's some other pieces, and I know Chuck and Eric both have some things to add there. But then I think we'll talk in the next question a little bit more about what are some of the other things that should be getting paid for, and maybe we start to tackle a little bit of that right now. But Chuck, what did you want to add?
Yeah, and I was going to add a little bit to that as well as what is paying for and some of the return. So you've got the hardware, you've got the software costs, so you've got all these other costs that are involved in being able to execute that scan, even the basic scan, or we call the DTC pull, and all the other things with the documentation, all those other things. So that's another thing that needs to be covered in paying for that scan. The troubleshooting guidance and assistance from the diagnostic technician, and hooking together the service information or required procedures from the information that you have gleaned from that scan tool, whether it be data or diagnostic trouble codes.
Yeah, that's some great points. I like to focus on this simplistically. What are you paying for? It's you're paying for the recommendations, the data interpretation, right? Things like that. But more importantly, you're paying for peace of mind. Liability is something that I think keeps us all up at night. As we repair cars, we want to make sure people are getting back into safe vehicles that will act as they should, as designed by the manufacturer, in the event it gets in a subsequent crash. So will we ever eliminate 100% of the liability as a repair facility? The short answer is no. But if we can mitigate it to the best of our ability, that helps us sleep at night. And how do we do that? Well, I could tell you here at AirPro, when we do any form of diagnostic, we record every screen session that we have on that vehicle, right? Every time we touch a vehicle, every time we get in there and do a form of diagnosis, we're recording every step that we take to ensure that vehicle goes back to the condition as designed by the manufacturer. So, we address both those things, but I think what you're paying for is safety and peace of mind. I think that's a big component that people miss out when it comes to paying for and getting paid for diagnostics.
Yeah, I'm going to add just a little bit. All great points there, Eric. But again, too, is one of the differences between doing a scan and doing diagnosis when it comes into a mechanical repair shop versus a collision repair shop. So when you have a collision event happens where the vehicle's towed in, the owner drives it in, those kind of things. We have to go through a discovery phase. We have to find out what's wrong with the vehicle, and a lot of times the owner doesn't even know. So that's the other thing is being able to identify the unseen damages, the things that aren't working correctly. where in a mechanical shop, a customer comes to you and says, my check engine light is on, or this isn't working properly, and you have a specific complaint that you're going after. So as you're going through this with the scanning, analyzing the data, it's a discovery phase to identify it before you get to the end of the repair and find out, I've got more things wrong than I realized at the beginning. So that's all wrapped up in this as well.
Yeah.
Now, Eric, you mentioned documentation. What are some of the pieces of documentation that I really need, when I want to get paid for doing this?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and we all have. It's a lot, right? When we're doing this, we want to get the documentation. But Josh, I know you wanted to start with this question because you're pretty passionate about it. So
yeah. So let me start by saying that this might make it sound like it's simple, right? And that if you just check these boxes, everything's going to run smoothly. And we recognize fully that sometimes this goes as expected, and sometimes it is just a nightmare to deal with trying to get everything paid for at the end of the day. And we recognize that it's not an easy task. But the short answer is thorough documentation. So when when the question is, what documentation do you need? All of it. You need to document everything. So ultimately, you need to be able to explain everything. We need to explain everything to the shop personnel, and that they should take the time to read and understand what we've done and what the remote technician was doing, and make sure that our technician is willing to take the time to explain that and walk through all of the information so that the shop has a thorough understanding of what was done, why it was done, and why it's relevant to the overall repair. So we need to walk through all of that and make sure that both our technician, the technician at the shop who's on the other end of the line, as well as anybody else there at the shop that needs to know, has all of that information and is comfortable with it. They may be relying on us, or you all actually may be relying on us to be the experts, and that's great, but we're not there when it comes time to negotiate with the bill payer. And if the shop is only going to refer to what we wrote and not take the time to necessarily really digest that information and be able to speak to it, the likelihood of getting steamrolled, I think, just increases. So, it comes down to thorough documentation and then understanding what was there. Eric, you had something else you wanted to add there as well. What'd you have?
Yeah, the documentation is imperative. It truly, we have to have it to justify what we do to any part of the repair that we perform within a repair facility, right? Whether you're replacing a frame rail or repairing a fender, it doesn't matter. We have some form of documentation, whether it be written documentation on the estimate or photos or what have you. But I think the component that's missed the most is the ability to effectively communicate this documentation, this information to the customer and the payee. Sometimes the customer is the payee, right? And contractually it is, but we won't get into that, right? Contractually, the payee is typically not the insurance company. The insurance company is just who's cutting the check, right? But we have to be able to confidently and effectively communicate this information to both parties to build value in what we're doing. Simplistically sliding a position statement across a desk, that's not going to get it done. And I would ask you, would you do that with your customer, right? If someone comes in and brings in a vehicle for repair, are you simply sliding them the estimate or repair plan, because I hate the term estimate, or the position statement, and walking away with the assumption they understand the need for this operation? I would hope the answer is no. So as you gather this documentation, we have to be able to confidently communicate it to all parties involved so that they understand the need. So communication is a big part that's missed at the repair level of the vehicle.
And Chuck, I think you had a couple of thoughts that tie back to Jason's question a minute ago about, what are we paying for, but also what are we not necessarily getting paid for? And I think that ties in here with documentation. What'd you have there?
Yeah, and the documentation is going to go well beyond what you printed out from the scan tool. These are the DTCs I've seen and those recommendations. So, and again, with that being a starting point, but taking that documentation further and documenting the procedures that you did based on the results that you got from that documented scan. So if you have issues that are going on a vehicle, or it requires that you disable the airbag system, that's an operation that you need to document that you did, and that's a labor operation, and the shop needs to be compensated for these additional procedures. Or if you have an issue with the wheel speed sensor that requires you pulling a wheel and doing an inspection of a connector based on the information that comes from the scan report. That's additional documentation and labor time that is spent on that vehicle that needs to be compensated for. So I think a lot of those things kind of get done automatically. I know some shops do that very well, but I think that that's a missed opportunity in documenting that you did these procedures based on the recommendations. And keep in mind as well that a lot of the recommendations that you're going to get from a scan, and it maybe someday we'll have that magic scan tool that you plug it in and it tells us that it's a broken connector or failed component and exactly what we need to do, but we're not there yet. But the physical diagnostic checks need to be documented. Service information supported with that as well. So if you're doing something's going to need a calibration. Calibrating something is not scanning. That's a separate and apart procedure. The same thing with programming. So having the documentation that these other operations are taking place, even though they're being done with a scan tool, it's not a pre-scan and it's not a post-scan or a DTC pull.
Yeah, I think those are that's great points, Chuck, for sure. We got a couple comments in here, a couple chat comments in here. Just want to kind of touch on and kind of tie this all kind of together. So, one thing, it's about safe and proper repairs by technicians that are trained, skilled, and know what to do and know what not to do. So I think that's an excellent point on it. And then Kyle, I'm with you 100% on this one too. A lot of shops, I don't know if they don't care necessarily, isn't maybe the word I would use, but that may be the case for some, but they just look at it as plug and play. That's another issue. Again, it's not a silver bullet. And again, I tie it back to another thing that we've been in the industry, so the scanning part of it could be kind of compared, I think, to the three-dimensional, measuring, set up and measure. It doesn't include the actual repair and the pulling. That's a whole, different topic. It's a whole different skill set. It's not just about, setting it up and measuring it. It's about analyzing what exactly is wrong with the vehicle, developing that repair plan, and then executing, those repair plans, and then monitoring that, measuring throughout. Again, similar to the scanning part of it as well. So I think those are all good tie-ins to it. And I do believe that, people do think that it is just, again, that plug it in, push a button, and my work here is done. And I hope that we're getting past that. I think that we're getting past that with, the articles we see in the industry. For a long time was this pre-scan, post-scan debate. And now, most of the articles I see in publications and online are around more on the calibration side. But we're still, I think, missing that diagnosis, repair planning, and identifying what exactly is wrong with the vehicle, and then repairing the vehicle. We got the pre-scan, we got the post-scan, we got the calibration. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to take place in between there. Is that fair to say, guys?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly fair to say. And, I read these publications and I talk to shops, and they want to get involved in calibration. They want to buy the targets. They want to set up their shop with the calibration center, but they don't yet have the diagnostic portion down yet. And it's I think, to your point, it's not just checking a box. I work with a lot of shops around the country, and they do the pre and post scan and they check the box. But it's more than that. And it all ties in together. And you should be monitoring, as you said, your diagnosis, and that ties into calibration. You can't get into calibration if you don't have diagnostics down. That's for sure. I know, Chuck, you're pretty passionate about that. Letting shops know
Yeah.
that jump in the deep end of the pool. They don't know how to swim yet.
Yeah, exactly. We've done some things about being, especially when it comes to ADAS, which has some relations to scanning, but again, calibration is a whole different animal. But we've got some other things we can maybe get into this on another date about being ADAS ready versus ADAS capable. So in having the diagnostics down, being able to executing the pre-scan, taking care of the repairs in the middle, and it's not just about scanning either. And Jason, you made a great point with the analogy of measuring versus straightening. So you don't know what you need to straighten until you measure. And that's a great analogy, and you can't go back and do it over. So if you don't get the measuring right, you don't have the vehicle straight, you don't have the diagnostics completed, you don't have all those things done, it doesn't matter whether you have the targets or not, or if you sublet it, the calibrations are not going to be successful. So you have to be ready for those calibrations. And then you can reach that point, okay, I'm going to acquire targets, I'm going to take the next step, because I do have getting the vehicle straight, getting the diagnostics done, making sure the codes are clear and the vehicle is ready for that calibration.
Those are great points. Like your ADAS ready versus ADAS capable. I think those are great points that, again, I think we've tended to overlook here a little bit in the industry. So, Josh, you got anything to add to any of that?
No, I think we've hit on all the main points here.
Oh, we lost Josh. I lost Josh. I don't know if you guys.
I mean, it really boils down to thorough documentation and understanding what that documentation is meant to convey, so that when you as the shop representative are having that conversation with your customer or with the bill payer, you can stand there and explain it and be able to rationalize why it's important and why it's relevant to the overall repair, et cetera. Just because the vehicle was hit in the right front and you're seeing a fault that might be relevant to the left rear of the vehicle, that doesn't in and of itself mean that it's not related in some way. You've got to take the time to understand that, just like you would take the time to understand why you've got to blend into an adjacent panel or something like that. This is the same thing. You've got to understand what was going on and why it's important and how it's tied to the overall repair, or why it isn't. And in some cases, that documentation is just as important, because you're able to document that it wasn't associated with the repair and it was part of a pre-existing condition, but it still needed to be determined. And now you've got record of it in either case.
All right. So my next question, I think this is my favorite kind of question that regarding scanning. It kind of ties into what we're talking about here. But I think for our viewers today, if they take one thing away from this, I think this could be the question around. So when we're talking about pre-scanning or post-scanning or scanning in general, is it a cost or is it a revenue stream?
So I love this question too, and we get it a lot. And the short answer is both, right? Anytime, any kind of business you're running, any kind of repair facility, everything starts as a cost until you determine correct implementation, correct billing, consistency, and check off all those boxes to create a revenue center, right? So two things, in my opinion, is one of which is revenue shouldn't be your only driver when it comes to diagnostics. Properly repairing the vehicle and customer safety should be your primary driver. But that being said, the byproduct of doing the right thing in a repair creates a little revenue, right? Diagnostics, in my opinion, anything you do within your repair facility, painting cars, repairing, diagnostics, should be a revenue center within your repair facility. I mean, we are in business to generate revenue, right? So those are my thoughts on it. I think it's a little of both. You're starting with the cost center, developing a business plan to turn it into a revenue center. And I'll tell you one thing, profit is not a dirty word, right? All repair facilities should be looking to generate revenue. And I think properly done, with customer safety first and foremost in our mind, again, the byproduct of doing the right thing is generating revenue.
So I'll go next. I think, and I'll start by kind of just doing a quick parallel to, how things operate here at AirPro. I mean, so we've got, I'm responsible for the technician workforce here at AirPro. So all of the technicians that are accepting and performing these scans and doing the diagnostics and running through calibrations and all those kinds of things. It's my responsibility here. And so ask the same question: is it a cost, or is it a revenue stream? Right? Well, it's a cost. We got to compensate them and pay them to do their work. But then as a result of them performing their work, we're able to go out and provide services to customers and generate revenue. And, just to get into an example of the types of things that we go through, I mean, we've got to go out and find skilled diagnosticians. And so, we got to go find somebody. Recently we brought somebody on that had almost 15 years Nissan dealer specific experience. And still the first thing we did was spend, almost 2 months getting that person trained on the collision repair side of the industry, so that they could deal with collision repair diagnostics. They knew inside and out Consult, the Nissan Consult tool, and the different operating systems, the system architecture, if you will, for Nissan vehicles. But we still had to spend time getting them up to speed on what it looks like to, properly diagnose a vehicle that's been in a collision. Ultimately, having an accurate estimate that is the result of a pre-scan means you're going to have fewer supplements, you're going to have decreased cycle time, you're going to have improved touch time, all of which increases throughput for your shop. So even if you set aside any other means of tying revenue to using a remote diagnostics provider or having a sublet vendor, relationship or that sort of thing, if you take all of that out of the equation for just a moment, fewer supplements, decreased cycle time, improved touch time, and increased throughput for your shop. Sounds like a revenue stream to me. And meanwhile, the post scan, now at the other end of the repair, it's done correctly, it's going to result in fewer comebacks, which ultimately means reduced liability associated with allowing a vehicle to leave your shop with a safety system or something else that isn't operating as designed. So sometimes the revenue stream just means money on something that you shouldn't have lost it on, right? So it's avoiding the hemorrhage, being, the loss. And so I think in this case, I think all of these examples kind of hold up. That's my 2 cents.
You got a good point there, John. And you hit rather than think about what the cost is to do it, what's the cost if you don't?
Sure.
Right. Well, that's well said.
Chuck, yeah, absolutely. Rework can get very expensive as well. Eliminating, eliminating rework or working for free from not doing it, I think is a bigger risk. And some of this with it being a cost of revenue, and it comes back to the documentation and the other things that you do with the information. So what I look at, doing a pre-scan and gathering the information, not just with the equipment and the investment of the equipment, but as an investment in the repair plan of that vehicle to get it right. That leads to all the points that Josh just brought up, improving your cycle time, ordering the right parts early in the repair process, making sure that the areas that are discovered from a technician looking at that vehicle are addressed up front. And again, it comes back to the documentation. All the actions that you have to take to identify the probable causes of certain diagnostic trouble codes or certain faults or certain systems, you need to document and you need to get on your repair order and compensated for that. And all these things drive it towards a revenue stream.
Yeah. Those are all great points, certainly. And, every time I get a question on, well, I'm having troubles with this person or this organization, with getting paid for pre-scan, post-scan, again, it goes back to, I think they're missing the point again. They're walking past those dollars to pick up pennies, because the labor intensive operations are, again, that diagnosis, that repair, that all the stuff that comes past after that. And, Josh, I think a couple of great points that you made with regarding, fewer supplements, improved cycle time, fewer customer, comebacks, which ultimately improves CSI. I think from the insurer standpoint, I think that the thing that they often don't think about is all those things together also means fewer rental car days. So again, if I do all that, if I've got an accurate picture of the damage on the vehicle up front, and I know what exactly is going to go into it, I don't discover it on a Friday afternoon at 2:00 and I have to tell the customer, your car's not gonna be ready till Monday or Tuesday next week. Now I got a whole nother weekend of revenue, or a whole nother weekend of rental cars. I think that's the thing that, again, gets lost because they don't understand what exactly we're talking about here. So I think that's another message I think that we can deliver to the industry about why it's so important to, again, back to measuring, because I think that's something that, we've gotten past people not understanding why you have to measure everything these days, or maybe you haven't, but I would like to think that we do. And I think we're heading in that direction because there's so many more benefits beyond that. It really just gives us that initial overall impression of the vehicle before we begin those repairs and repair the vehicle properly. And it does become a revenue stream because, again, we're repairing vehicles properly and we are improving CSI and, come all the stuff that we talked about. So I think those are all great points. So anything else on that topic?
Well, Jason, I'd like to point out that I find it very difficult to believe that people are just putting cars together at 2-3 o'clock on a Friday, get them back to their customers. I think everyone just schedules, perfectly throughout the week, and we're not shoving cars out on Friday anymore, right? That can't still be going on out there.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Unlikely. We have no data to support that at all.
Yeah, no, that just can't be happening. The I'm off and Monday out Friday. That can't be going on. I think they're all excellent points. But I just want to hammer the fact that exactly what you said. Don't step over dollars to pick up pennies. Customer safety should be first. We should be putting cars or people back into vehicles and cars that we're confident are going to act as designed. And that's the goal here. If you do that properly with proper implementation, proper pricing, proper billing, and consistency, the worry about it being a cost center rather than a revenue center should dissipate.
So you're saying you should do it properly?
Should do it properly. It's like I said earlier, I could tell you as just to test it, I gave my son a scan tool he was 11 at the time, he's 12 now, and said, go in there, find how to read the codes and clear them all. And, they're pretty simplistic. He did it in a quick fashion. So but that's not proper.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely. And I'm going to lean on that post scan side of this too, with the revenue stream, and this is really where you can get bit by just applying a post repair scan, clearing the codes, and all the codes are clear, I'm good to go, without doing the QC process, doing the road test, doing those all kinds of things. That just doing the right things. If you do all the right things, the money's going to happen by itself, providing you document. But in a couple examples. So you can take a vehicle that has a park assist system code or a fault with that system, and you can go in, turn the key on, start the car up through that code. That code will start all day long. If you don't put that car in reverse and back up to something, that system will not self-check. So even though the scan tool cleared the code, you haven't verified that the repair is complete yet until you do some of those other things. Same thing is true with vacuum leaks. You have a vacuum leak, you can clear that code, the code will go away, the check engine light will go off, and it may appear to you that you fix that problem until that customer drives the car away and it gets enough time for that system to self-check. Then you got a check engine light coming back on, and then you have rework. And again, with the technician getting beyond the scan, checking those diagnostics, or having somebody that understands what the data is supposed to look like, what needs to be checked on that system to prevent those rechecks, to prevent that stuff from coming back in. It's like I said, clearing codes does not fix a vehicle. It may appear that it does at times, but you just need to be mindful of that. And it doesn't replace QC procedures, a road test, dynamic road tests, especially after you do ADAS calibrations. And it keeps pointing back to the documentation that you did it, and there's compensation for the shop for doing those checks.
Well, you make a great point there, Chuck, and I don't even think we hammered on the fact that, as we talk about cost and revenue stream, because we're still on the subject and we anticipated being on it for a little while, is, I like to keep in mind the repair opportunities that Diagnostics brings to light that you may not have identified previously. And that we're talking about calibrations, additional parts, all things that generate some form of revenue if you're doing it correctly, and using Diagnostics to identify additional repair operations, or even at times with customer, maybe out-of-pocket upsell opportunities based on repairs that are identified through the diagnostic process. So it all ties in together, but if you're doing it correctly, you'll quickly find that you could use the diagnostic recommendations to add additional parts or operations to your repair plan that are justifiable, that in turn generate more revenue.
Yeah, and prevent things with customers as well. And I'm glad that you brought that up with the upsell opportunities. So when things are identified with a vehicle, that's a customer responsibility, and you offer the customer the option to make that additional repair while the vehicle's still there, you've done two things. Either you do upsell the job and you make more money off that job that generates revenue, or the customer is well aware that that condition exists, and they're not going to come back with ever since you worked on my car, this happened. So you've informed them and given them the opportunity to correct it.
It wasn't like that before the accident.
Never is, right? It never is. My car never
Never
did
is.
that.
Never heard that before.
No.
Right about that.
Hey, I just want to go back. Chuck, you said it so succinctly. I just want you to repeat it one more time slowly for everybody, because I think this could be like the slogan for scanning and diagnostics. I think you said, and I may have the quote a little bit wrong, so I may be paraphrasing a little bit, but I think it bears some repeating. Clearing codes does not repair the vehicle. I don't think you can say it more clearly than that.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. So when you clear a code, is what you're doing is you are erasing the result of a computer self-test. So the computer does a self-test. It fails the self-test. It sets a diagnostic trouble code. That diagnostic trouble code may or may not turn on a warning lamp. It depends on the state of the code. So when you clear the code, that's all it is that you are doing, is removing it. And every single system that is going on with a vehicle needs to run a self-check. Some of these are continuous, and some of them are conditional monitoring. So I'm going to get a little bit technical here. Conditional monitoring means the vehicle needs to be going 30 miles an hour and the engine needs to be warmed up before the computer self-tests its system. Or like an ABS, it needs to be going 25, 30 miles an hour, and the computer looks at all the wheel speed sensors and do they make sense? If one's out of whack, that's when it sets a code. So clearing the code didn't fix the fault with the wheel speed sensor. It just reset the diagnostic state of that. And that's where the verification needs to come in. The other issue that makes it appear that clearing a code made something work is that diagnostic trouble codes in history can disable different features on a vehicle. So you can have and I'll use air conditioning because it's a pretty simple one. So you have a vehicle temperature sensor that has set a code and is not working properly, that can disable the air conditioning. So you fix that, you do that, you clear the code, all of a sudden the air conditioning starts working because of the computer algorithm, and it appears that clearing the code fixed the car. So that was kind of the long explanation, but the simple part is it's absolutely right. Clearing codes does not fix the problem.
Yeah, that's
very succinct, Chuck. Very succinct.
Yeah. You can sum it up in 7 words, huh? I like it. So we just know that for future reference.
cool. All right. So ultimately, who is ultimately responsible for not only the approval of the scan, but the payment? Ultimately, where are we going to get that the approval from?
Yeah. So this is, and we weren't sure we were going to make it this far. I'm glad we did, and we covered a lot of that in the last question. But obviously, laws vary state by state. But when it comes down to it, it's the owner of the vehicle is your customer, right? That's who's ultimately. And I don't want to quote individual state laws, but I would venture to make a safe bet that the customer bringing in the car is ultimately responsible for payment in most all cases. That's why it's so important to communicate this effectively to the customers. Let them know what you're doing to the car. Let them know that you're putting them back in a safe vehicle. Let them know that you're going to fully diagnose the safety systems. If for some reason their claim or coverage is not going to pay for that specific operation, you have a much better chance of them getting involved and helping you fight for that payment if they fully understand it. I don't know. I'm sure most people know this, but as a repair facility, you hold all liability for this repair, 100% of it. The payees or the insurance companies, they don't hold any portion of the liability because they're not the ones actually repairing the car, right? So I always tell people in the shop, don't make decisions based on information you're receiving from organizations that don't have your best interest at heart. Right? Make the decisions that what's best for your customer safety and what's best for your organization from a liability standpoint. So I could talk about this for hours on who is ultimately responsible, where you get your approvals from, but I'll shorten it with that and pause for some other feedback because I could go forever.
Yeah, I think you made the point. I want to again tie it back to medical because I think that's something that we can all relate to. When that doctor says, "Well, we're not really sure what's going on here, so we want to take a closer look," whether it's again X-ray, MRI, or whatever other technology might be out there. But then they'll come back to you and say, like, "Okay, here's what we found, and here's what it means, and here are our options." I think the same thing goes for here. If we can sit down, and you guys used the word understanding several times today. If we can sit down with that customer and say, look, we did the scan of the vehicle, we've identified, these issues, we believe these are related to collision, Josh, you mentioned upsell, we believe these ones might not be related to collision, however, we can take care of those. I think that understanding and sitting down with them does a lot of different things. Number one, it heads towards that proper repair of that vehicle. And also, I think it gives that customer that a level of comfort that you know what you're doing and that you do have their best interest in mind. So I think there's a lot of benefits, to that word understanding and sitting down with them and explaining what exactly you're doing it and why you're doing it. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
I couldn't have said.
yeah, I really like those analogies, and anybody that knows me, hung around with me, I use different analogies all the time with things. But and the understanding of this, and the other thing to keep in mind with the X-ray analogy is you've got the person that their job is to take the X-ray. So they take the X-ray and they have that information. Then that gets passed over to the specialist to read that information. So again, it relates right to, I collected information from the vehicle for diagnostic trouble codes, and that's a small piece of it. Now the analysis and what do I have to do and do next, and being able to have those conversations with that knowledge is very important in the repairs we're doing to vehicles. So it's very relevant.
You know, Jason, and you know, the question is who's ultimately responsible for payment, even when insurance is involved. You know, as we're comparing to medical, because I think there is some synergy there in the way things operate. I mean, right here at my desk, I don't know if people could see that, is a bill from the doctor that I received yesterday. My insurance covered X amount, and you know, I'm responsible for the rest of it. Right. So because ultimately, even in this instance, I am the customer. Right. So I think there's some synergy there. And when people start to understand that and help the customers understand that, it's going to make the collection a little bit less painful.
You know, Eric, that relates to a question that came in, you know, regarding that, you know, because people do tend to, in all caps, this one was freak out when they realize that they're responsible for it. Have you found that tying it back to, again, medical, like, you know, with if you do go to the doctor, some things are covered, some things aren't covered. How can we, you know, better, because everyone just thinks it's automatically, I have insurance, so everything should be paid, everything should be covered. You know, how do we kind of go around, you know, how do we work with the customer on kind of explaining that? And would you tie that into just what you described there? Would you mention that?
Yeah, so you know, I'm not far removed from body shops, right? I haven't been out of the shop for too long. We're in them every day, and I think it comes from addressing these things up front, right? Don't let this become a surprise to the customer, and part of that is going to be, as an industry, beginning to condition the end users that this is a required process. And this could be any process. This isn't just tied to diagnostics, Jason. This can go to any portion, right? Maybe replacement of a hood when you know, adjuster writes to repair it, you know, and there's all kinds of additional costs that could come. But I think the most important aspect of that is to make sure it's not a surprise. Let's address these things up front when the customer is dropping off their vehicle. Let's let them know what we plan on doing to it. Let's let them know, you know, if there are additional costs, they would be responsible for those costs. And it may be painful in the beginning because, as an industry, customers are conditioned to the fact that they drop off the car with a $500 check for their deductible, and their car gets repaired to the fullest, and they assume it's repaired the way it's supposed to be, right? That's the normal today. So it'll take some work educating our customers that may or may not be the case. It's going to take some work to address these things on the front end, so when they come pick up their car, we don't surprise them with another $164 bill for the difference, right? Like, it all comes down to education, communication, and understanding. That's my opinion.
There's that understanding word again.
Understanding.
Yeah.
So,
sometimes I don't understand my understanding. No.
Jason?
Yeah.
You may be about to address this, so apologies if that's the case. But the comment in the chat about creating a short video, I think that's something that AirPro would be happy to participate or assist with. But I think it would be best served if it was actually put together by Collision Hub. Is that, without, I recognize I'm putting you and Kristen on the spot, but is that something that you guys would be interested in collaborating on?
I don't see why not. I think that'd be a great idea. I think that would be, again, kind of taking this and wrapping it into it, better explain to them what exactly we're doing.
And just so in case anybody missed it, the idea was a short video that could be shown to it, to insureds, that gives a concise explanation of what and why, basically, for pre and post scans, so that everybody's giving the same message. And I think that would be a great tool to make available to shops that are maybe having a hard time conveying the message as effectively as they'd like to. And I'll speak for AirPro. I'm sure that's something we'd be happy to participate in and contribute to.
Sure, that'd be great. Okay, so that wasn't where I was going to go. That was coming up, Josh. But so thanks for jumping on that. I'm going to go back to a couple questions that were a little bit earlier. What efforts? This one that came through the chat for those that did not see it. What efforts is AirPro making beyond these great webinars to inform and re-educate the industry? Do you have some ideas how we can be more effective in this?
Yeah. Josh, you could start, and if you don't cover what I have in my mind, I'll jump in.
Okay, so it's kind of a trap. I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah. So I mean, from my perspective, what we're trying to do is, we're trying to I think increase our presence from a marketing standpoint to get the information out to the industry, to our customers. I think, you said it, I recognize the question was beyond these webinars, but certainly this is something that's a little new for us. I mean, this is only our second one, and we've got several more on the planner to do more of these. And beyond that, we're working on some internal training development opportunities that we would like to also make available where appropriate externally. But above and beyond that, let's see whether or not I managed to fall into Eric's trap or not. Let's see what Eric had.
No, you covered it, and I didn't want to step, because I know that Josh handles most of the training with the trainers. Don't want to give him first crack at it. But what we're doing is we're being very strategic with it, and we have to be. There's multiple stakeholders within the industry, and the level of education revolving around diagnostics is lacking. I would say repair facilities have more knowledge than most of the other stakeholders, right? We have the insurance companies, we have the body shops or end users, we have the OEs, the OE manufacturers, and we have the customers, right? So what we're going to do, and we continue to do, is we're going to work to educate all four stakeholders that are involved in the industry. We're going to work with the OEs to determine what kind of education they'd like to get to the end user, and further help educate the OEs on what we do out in the field and how the repair facilities are addressing this challenge, right? Because to be honest, a lot of them don't know. They don't know what happens at the end user in the body shops, right? We're going to help educate the shops, whether it be through webinars, body shop associations, videos, all kinds of things. We're going to help you with the end users. Customers, we could help develop a rolling loop video, right? We need to start helping you as a repair facility educate your customers on what we're doing, and we need to provide the tools for you to do so in a confident manner, and we'll do that for you. So if we could attack those four facets of the industry simultaneously, it's just about getting everyone on the same level of education to be able to address these challenges.
All right, another question. Another question that came in, and I can take this one for you. What is or you guys can chime as well, but I have an idea. What is the best way to address crib 177 from Toyota for OCS recalibration? Scans will not show DTCs, and it presents sometimes difficult to explain why it needs to be done. One thing I would suggest doing is going to Repair Driven News. They did an interview with Eric Mendoza from Toyota, and the date of this one was August 25th, 2016, where Eric Mendoza walked through the OCS calibration requirements from a vehicle that was involved in a collision while parked and unattended. And he just shakes the vehicle, from my recollection in the video, and shows the difference in it. So I would definitely leverage that video. I don't know if you guys have anything additional on that you would suggest for how to address the Toyota Bolton on OCS calibrations.
I think
Well, I've got something on it, and that is a great question, and it not only applies to the Crib 177, but it applies to many other things on the vehicles. That comes back to the basic scan. So knowing when you go into that vehicle, there's certain procedures, and Toyota isn't the only one, that you need to go into that system, and you need to put the seat in the right state and inspect the state of that seat and see what the seat weight reading is in plus or minus. And if it's outside of that parameter, then you need to go forward and take another step and recalibrate or re-zero it, depending on the year, make, and model. But to support that comes to the service information, and the Crib 177 is part of the Toyota service information. So showing the need that it needs to be done, it's in the OEM information, and not just for the seat calibrations, but for many other procedures as well. So that's a great question.
And impressive that a shop knows about Crib 177. That means they're doing their homework. So kudos to whoever asked that question.
That's progress. That was from Mario, I believe. Yep, that was from Mario. So
great. That's fantastic.
Let's see here. What else we got for questions or comments? Insurers are not going to watch a video. Yes, maybe not. I think that especially in today's environment, today's world, with a lot of this virtual training that we're going to be doing here moving forward, I think we do need to, educate them. I do think they will watch it. I think we've got a lot of connections out there in the industry. And again, I think we can make a lot of progress on this. So I do think they will watch it. And I think we just need to keep educating them and moving forward. We do have a, pretty broad insurer base that does follow us as well. So we'll keep pushing this out and keep pushing out other education, and we'll keep working forward. And I think, again, it goes back to, if we can help them understand what needs to be done, whether that's you as a shop owner, whether that's us as Collision Hub and AirPro Diagnostics, or in conjunction, all of us together, if we can get that understanding to the insurers, if we get that understanding back to that customer again, having that customer, having them in our, standing beside them and defending them and making sure that they understand that we're trying to put them back in their vehicle properly, I think is very powerful. That's a very powerful tool for us to use moving forward for that.
Maybe we'll just title the video "How to Avoid Paying for Pre and Post Scans."
You might
then they'll watch it.
There you go.
I like it.
Okay. Let's see here. I saw another question that someone else popped in here. Do y'all, that's use for us Northerners, that's use guys. Do y'all use guys plan on another webinar on calibration and getting paid if you do have ADAS calibration equipment? So
that's a great question. That's our next one in 2 weeks.
There you go.
2 weeks.
Yeah, for all y'all.
So y'all be ready. Y'all be ready, because it's in 2 weeks.
And so the other thing I want to encourage you.
Hope to see you there, Sierra.
Yeah. The other one, that was a great time to kind of put this out here as well. I think we've got a series of these scheduled with AirPro Diagnostics every other week for several weeks, for a while, moving into I can't talk anymore, into the future. So if you do have ideas like that for additional ones, please feel free to email me, jason@collisionhub.com, or kristen@collisionhub.com with those ideas. We're also working on putting together a survey to reach out to all of you that have attended today and registered for today. And we'll be sending out a survey as well for more feedback on additional presentations, additional webinars that you'd like to see. So if in addition to this, the ADAS, the calibration part of it, if you have other ideas for future webinars and presentations, please by all means reach out to us and let us know. I will share the AirPro Diagnostic information at the end of this, so I would invite you to reach out to them as well if you have ideas for that for future. Okay.
And I see there's a couple of questions that have come in that maybe we didn't get a chance to get to. It looks like a couple of technical ones from John S. John, if you'd like to send us an email afterwards with the contact info that Jason's about to share, we'll be happy to tackle that and get a response back to you, okay?
Sorry, I'm just responding to a Q&A that came in. I guess I can just answer it verbally here. So can we watch this on rebroadcast? Yeah, absolutely. This will be, we'll get this uploaded as soon as this is done. I will get this uploaded to our server, and Kristen and team in Arkansas will get it onto the to the website, same place where we had all the webinars, and then we'll push it out via social media as well. All right, so we got all kinds of questions coming in here now. So let's see here. Are there any that you guys watched that I missed? I was typing when we missed that last one. So when we installed the new bumper reattached sensor, tested system working properly, no warning messages. Should it still be recalibrated? Again, look through the procedures and find that information and determine if calibration be required for it. That's not it. It may or may not be. It's something you need to research on each and every one of them. So Josh did just send the contact information to everybody, and I was going to share the screen. I got phones going on. I got emails. I got chat, Q&A. Just
You're a busy guy.
On here.
Oh,
Here
you're popular.
I'm something.
Yeah.
Well, there's oh. Are you seeing
Perfect.
that?
Thank you.
Got it. So there's everybody's contact information.
Josh, is your home phone number on there?
I don't have a home phone, Eric.
Neither do I. Neither do I.
Chuck does.
Yeah, I do.
I nailed
Old
it.
school. Old school.
Still got the old answering machine? Yeah.
No, I don't have one of those anymore.
Okay. Are there any questions that we missed on here? Toyota dealer says that if, again, I'm guessing this goes back to our, okay, reinstall new bumper, reattach sensor, test the system. Toyota dealer says it's self-test, and if no PCS malfunction message, no calibration needed. Again, John, I would definitely go into the service manual and look at that. I've had similar issues on another Toyota vehicle. A friend of mine had a Toyota issue on a vehicle that, again, no lights. The dealership said it was okay, but we provided some evidence that, hey, in fact, when you do this particular operation, calibration is required. So that's really the best way to do it. I wouldn't rely on what the dealership's telling you. But I would definitely, go into the service information, look up those procedures that you did, and at the end of those, it's going to tell you when calibration is required. We did do another webinar that's available again on that YouTube channel, the Collision Hub YouTube channel for the rebroadcast, and I'll post it up here momentarily when these guys when they talk next. But we did do a "When is calibration necessary" webinar. It's one that I led a couple of weeks ago. That's available on that YouTube channel. So let me grab the URL for that. While I ask these guys if they've got anything else to add to the conversation. Guys, any thoughts?
No, I watched that one, and it's very good. I think you hit it on the nail, the head of the nail. Look at your procedures. If I can give one form of advice when addressing this, is do not trust what the dealer tells you over the phone. Do your own research, look at the repair procedures, and determine whether or not these systems need to be calibrated or programmed. As a general rule of thumb, if you manipulate any of these systems outside of the manufacturer specifications or the way it was built, whether through an R&I or any form of manipulation, you should be researching the procedure to determine whether it needs a calibration. But don't trust what you're being told over the phone. Go do your research and just follow the procedures. I think that's as simple as that.
Yeah, we've got a.
Yeah, I got to tell you a little story, but I got to tell you a little story about that, calling the dealership with that. So what I spent several years in the dealership service department, and we'd have the phone ring out there that would be sent to us from outside customers and outside shops. Whenever those calls came in, we had a specified individual who was a detailer that worked in the back. His name was Percy, and we forwarded all those calls to Percy.
All right. Poor Percy. Poor guy.
All right. I did post the URL, the bit.ly URL for those of you that haven't been to the replay website. So this will be there later. Like I said, as soon as I get done here, it will download, and then I'll upload it to our web server, and then we'll try to get it out, and then Kristen will push that out via our social media later once that's available for us. So Did I miss any questions, guys, that you saw here? I don't see. Yes, you did say that, Risa. Some of the dealers do definitely have some some room for improvement. How's that sound? I think that looks like about it.
Jason, I did just get a text, and when it comes to the calibration webinar, I think Mandy did just correct me. It may be 2 webinars from now, but it's within the next 2. We'll take a look. Just look at the schedule, because I think the next one is about workflow. So go to the Collision Hub events webpage, and it will be on there. But it is coming.
That is a good catch there. Yes. Where does Diagnostic fit into my workflow is the next one, and that will be on Wednesday, May 20th, and that will be at 1 p.m. Central Time. Registration is also required for that one. So again, go to, as Eric suggested, go to collisionhub.com to the events page and click on the link there to register for that one. I think that's gonna be another great one. And then 2 weeks later is when we're going to talk about the calibration part of it. And again, if you have other suggestions for future webinars, please reach out to us and let us know.
So lesson learned, don't listen to Eric until somebody has the opportunity to edit and correct.
Hey, I can tell you when I'm wrong, I will correct myself. That is for sure.
Make a good note. I'll make a note of that, Josh. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. But if they learn anything today, I'll take that away from today. So. All right. Oh, let's see here. So I got one more came in, maybe. No, we're good. Okay. Guys, anything in closing?
No, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate it, Collision Hub, and appreciate all the questions from the audience.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks.
We very much appreciate AirPro Diagnostics stepping up to do this again, and we're looking forward to coming back in a couple of weeks. I do want to, before we sign off, we do have one tomorrow. Can't believe it's Thursday already, May 7th. Tomorrow we have one from RSG on detailing. I believe it's in detailing. I can't really tell because it's going to be in Spanish, and our description is in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish or read Spanish, so. But I do believe it's in on detailing. So tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central Time. No registration required for that one. So for all of your Spanish-speaking peers, please come in and join us for that tomorrow. So until then, I'm going to say goodbye. And again, thank you to AirPro Diagnostics and for everybody that's on the call and for all those of you that had to drop off a little bit early. Appreciate your time this afternoon. So have a great afternoon, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And then again, in a couple of weeks back with our friends from AirPro. So thanks, everybody.